morning everybody, thanks for joining us today to Bankruptcy and Back Again, our first episode. Really appreciate your attention, and I hope that we can offer some good value to you today. So today's episode is really the first episode of our little video series, Making Money, Losing Money and the Road to Recovery. And what we want to do each week is leave with you a few little strategies that can help move you in the right direction, or rather perhaps avoid you going down the wrong direction. Either way, I'll be happy with one of those results. So today really what I was going to do is just share with you a little bit more about my story, give you a little bit more of a chance to understand the process that we went through. Here's one of the problems that we have in our society today. Everything's a snapshot, okay? Everything's a soundbite. You want to quickly run around, you want to get 30 seconds worth of information here, you want to get 30 seconds worth of information there, you want to condense somebody's entire life story into one book that you hope will give you all of the secrets and tips and 7 strategies, beautifully bullet pointed, that'll help you to move you in the right direction. And all of those things can help, but at the end of the day, you're never really going to understand what somebody's been through until you've been through it yourself, and unfortunately that's just the way life is. Now there are many things we can learn from others so that we don't have to make the same mistakes, but ideally, a good deal of what we're going to become successful at, we're going to become successful at after going through a lot of trials and tribulations ourselves. So my story basically started in property. I had a very long, slow build up to our multi-million-dollar business, if that's what you want to call it. We had, my wife and I had a large property portfolio that we developed over a few short years, and the trouble with property is that, the trouble with our property business perhaps is that we were investing in developments, we were investing in student housing, we had renovations, things of that nature, and when you're in property you can make a lot of money in a very short period of time, but the trouble is there's not always a lot of cash flow attached to those properties, and every time you sign your name on the dotted line to commit to a transaction, you're tying up hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of potential borrowing capacity that you then have to make up elsewhere, and you've got to manage those cash flows. Now everything we looked at was pretty well positive cash flow, but that didn't change the fact that you still had a huge shortfall between what you were committing to up front and the cash flows you were trying to develop coming through the other end. So anyway, long story short, we developed a property business. We looked at going outside of that property business, and I'll tell you more about these in future vlogs, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. But we looked at going outside of that property business and going to retail stores, and the whole point of the retail stores was to develop consistent cash flow every single week that we could pop back into the property business and build that as a larger portfolio and get out of the residential game and get more into the commercial property arena, which is where I wanted to head to. So we did that, and in the process of doing that we grew too big too soon. I basically spent too much money in the wrong areas, not enough money in the right areas, made all of the mistakes that most entrepreneurs make first time out, and it wasn't a very fun experience at all. I ended up going under for the tune of about $3.5 million, and there was a lot of time required in the recovery, and once again in future episodes I'll tell you a little bit more about that. What I really wanted to focus on today was basically 3 points to help you get started if you're one of those people that have hit rock bottom. Now at the moment there are millions of people around the world, millions of business owners, millions of families that are recovering after the GFC, global financial crisis, and everyone says it's been and gone and past, it's total rubbish. These things are very long reaching, and they affect us for many, many, many years. They don't only affect us financially, they affect us mentally as well. There's self-confidence issues, people commit suicide over this sort of stuff. It's not a simple quick fix. Okay, so here's 3 things that I did to recover. Now after the bankruptcy was all done and dusted, and after we'd lost pretty well everything that we had, we moved, my wife and I moved with my 2 children I had at the time into a rented accommodation, and I was trying to work out how to get back on track again. The only thing I had was a pen. That's all I had. I had pen, paper, and I didn't even have access to the internet most times because I couldn't afford to pay for the internet charges. So I used to go down to the library quite often and use the internet down at the library, the free internet service. So my first tip I would suggest for you is to start where you are with what you've got. In my case, I started with a pen and started with some paper. And all I began to do was I just wrote. Now I wrote all sorts of different things that were on my mind, things that I was thinking about, different strategies that I came up with for different marketing plans for businesses that didn't even exist at the time. I wrote stories, I wrote experiences that I had, I just wrote, and it was a form of therapy for me. But the first tip I would have for you is start where you are with what you've got. And for some of us, that was far less resources than others, but as I said, in my case it was the pen and paper. So my first tip would be to just begin the process of documenting the experiences that you've gone through. My second tip for this week would be to get you to understand that your story has value. I remember going to a seminar many years ago where the presenter got up and he said, each one of you have had experiences that if documented people would pay to read. And I thought about that and I thought, you know what, he's right. You know, all of us are quite unique. We all have, even if we've got similar experiences, we all come at it from different angles, and we've all had totally different life experiences that we can all learn and grow from. So it's more so about understanding that what you have to say to somebody else will have value to somebody else if you're talking to the right market. So I want you to understand that your story has value. That's my top tip number 2 for this week. Now, top tip number 3, so I turn my page over here, is writing is a form of therapy. So if you're like me and you've been through a major financial disaster and you've had some very difficult emotional challenges as a result of that, perhaps you've had some physical health issues as a result of that, which is what I did. You know, for a year I had nightmares of murder and suicide, and that not always in that order, mind you, but that it was a very challenging time to move forward from. And all I could think about is, I just need to get through the next hour, I just need to get through the next day, I just need to get through until tomorrow, till next week, till next month, till next year. I just thought if I keep walking, surely soon enough something will open up and I'll be able to move forward again. That was all I was thinking. But in the meantime, I had no money for doing anything. I couldn't get myself a job. Former millionaires really aren't very high on most people's list of priorities in terms of hiring somebody for a new position. Bankrupts, you know, aren't looked upon too favourably. Not much better than criminals in many cases, I've found. And so I found that writing became a very cheap form of therapy for me. And as I wrote down the things that I was thinking about, a lot of the anger that I had, a lot of the frustration that I was experiencing melted away. It didn't all melt away, of course it was a long process in getting rid of it all, but that process of writing became very, very effective for me, and I'm sure it will be for you too. So use writing as a form of therapy. Now, if you're not very good at writing, I would suggest that you type it. If you're not very good at typing, then I suggest you get a digital recorder, you know, and record a weekly session once a day or once a week as to, you know, what you're going through and what you're thinking about. You may find it will become of great value to you down the track, even not for commercial purposes, just simply for emotional growth purposes. So think about that. That's my top tip number 3 for this week, to understand that writing is a form of therapy. So if you want to have a chat with me, send me an email, talk to me on the phone. I really want to know what you would like me to talk about in these sessions, if there's anything in particular that you'd like me to cover. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week. If you haven't already got the funniest book on business and bankruptcy that you'll ever read, simply go to iamplify.com and type in Michael D. Russo and download your copy of Why Bankruptcy Rocks and Success is Overrated. The audio version is available right now on iamplify.com. Let me know how you go.